Stop what you're doing right now and subscribe to the newest college sports YouTube channel.
College football is around the corner, and the new BBOC channel is your destination for betting on college sports.
Interviews with former college athletes and other topics such as College Football 25.
Subscribe now and get in on the action.
Welcome to Buckets. My name's Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network, and this is your Defensive Player of the Year Best Bets and Deep Dive. That's the Hakeem Olajuwon Defensive Player of the Year award. I will mention that because I'm a big Hakeem guy as the official name for this award. Today, we will give you some best bets. We'll break down the award, how to bet it, how to look at it, who we think has a good chance, what are the long shots, how to approach this award in season, all that and more on today's show. To do that, I'm joined by Braxton Reynolds. You can catch him on Twitter at BReynolds200. Braxton, are you on Instagram, sir?
I am not. Got off that.
That's fine. Braxton's on Twitter at BReynolds200. You can catch him in the Action Network app as well. And I'm joined by Brian Fonseca, generational hater of the Boston Celtics. There's so many generational haters on our program. You can catch him at the Action Network. You can catch him at the New York Post. And you can catch him at the Mandatory TKO on YouTube. He does a great job breaking down all of the fighty fights. So make sure to check out Brian's work across the internet. A reminder that everything we talk about today can be found in the award-winning Action Network app. You can track all of our picks. You can get instant picks from our best analysts, which will be on there if you sign up for our pro subscription, guys like Brandon Anderson, and he'll have a Defensive Player of the Year bet once he gets to his, which he'll do on one of the Friday shows in October. You'll be able to hear that. You can catch all of our bets in the Action Network app. Also, check out youtube.com/the Action Network. Live shows galore. You got the Power Hour on Sundays for NFL. You've got the Green Dot Daily getting you set throughout the week. You're going to find something that you want to watch if you go to youtube.com/the Action Network. All right, let's go ahead and get started here, guys. And because this is a betting show, we're going to talk a lot about kind of like the process for DPOY this year. But we'll go ahead and we'll set the table with our best bets. Braxton, what are your best bets for DPOY 2024-25?
Well, I think Wemby is rightfully the front runner, but I don't like the value at the number it is, minus 165, which is about 63% implied probability. Not too happy about that. So I'm going Chet Holmgren, 16-1, and my long shot is Draymond Green at 150-1.
Ooh. We always love 150-1 here on this program. Brian Fonseca, what are your best bets for DPOY?
I'm going to willingly lose money on Bam Adebayo.
Yes!
Defensive Player of the Year once again. We're just going to do it. The only player in the NBA who's been top 5 in DPOY voting for 5 straight seasons. And he's only been a starter for 5 straight seasons. So we're going to lose money with Bam on purpose. We'll get into why. And also, I'm going to take shots with, these are long shots, Alex Caruso, who is now with the Oklahoma City Thunder, and Evan Mobley, who is now with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Who is still with the Cleveland Cavaliers, I should say.
I like it. Okay.
New coach.
Mine are, I also am joining Brian in losing money because if I just keep betting it, one of these fucking times, Bam Adebayo is going to win the award that he has deserved multiple times. He's the best goddamn defender in the NBA. I'm just going to keep betting it. He's going to be out of the league, and I'm going to be requesting this bet at the sports books for them. He retired last year. Don't care. I want to bet Bam Adebayo. I will finally win this bet. I'm betting Bam Adebayo 17-1. I'm also going to bet Jaren Jackson 25-1 and Jalen Suggs 100-1. I am probably going to join Braxton on the Draymond Island. I got to think about it. I've talked with Brandon, who's as high on the Warriors defense as any human being can possibly be. And I do keep looking down like the list of guys, and I'm like, yeah, Draymond checks a lot of boxes there. So let's start kind of here. The history of the award, I just want to go through some of the basics of this. The youngest player to ever win it was 23, and there were 4 players that did so at 23 years old. Alvin Robertson, Dwight Howard, Jaren Jackson Jr., and one Kawhi Leonard. The oldest player to win the award is 34, and that was Dikembe Mutombo. Who wants to sex Mutombo? Marcus Camby, which, by the way, Marcus Camby, probably the worst By the way, I didn't just randomly say that in case you're a youngster. Go Google who wants to sex
Right. Yeah.
Mutombo.
That needs context.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go Google who wants to sex Mutombo for a phenomenal story. Dikembe
Be
Mutombo,
careful where you
though,
Google it.
is the older at 34. Marcus Camby, who's probably the worst winner of this award. Like it was literally just like he rebounded a bunch and got a bunch of blocks for a not great defense. Like terrible award. At 32. He had several seasons where he was worthy, not that one. Mark Eaton won it at 32, and Rudy Gobert last season won it at 31. You're going to need to be a playoff team at least, and we've got a little bit more data on that. Brian, you've got some more data on kind of how good the team has to be for them to win DPOY, correct?
So basically, because this is one of my favorite awards to lose money on every single year, and just in general, one of my favorite awards because as you know, Matt, I'm a basketball masochist. I appreciate defense. I don't mind if games are 89 to 88 with 12 seconds left in the fourth quarter. I'm perfectly at home. I'm fine with that. But defensive player of the year, yeah, you're going to want to be on the top 3 team in your conference. The last 5 winners, have all been on top 3 teams in their respective conference. Also have been on 50-win teams. So we're looking back at the last 9 defensive player of the year winners. So we're going back to basically the 2015-16 season, which is, if you want to call it the modern era of NBA basketball, like that would be fine. 7 of those last 9 winners have been on the top 3 seed in their conference. The only one who wasn't was Rudy Gobert, who did it twice as a 5 seed with the Utah Jazz. The first time was in 17-18. The second time was in 18-19. And then you have 9 of the last 10 defensive player of the year winners being on 50-win teams. The only one who wasn't on a 50-win team was, again, Rudy Gobert, which I think this just was a down year for defensive player of the year. If you look at the 2017-18 voting and you try to look at, all right, who should have beaten Rudy Gobert? Like, there are absolutely like great cases across the board, but at the same time, like, there wasn't a convincing defensive player of the year winner that year, which is why Rudy Gobert ends up winning the award despite missing 26 games that season, which probably doesn't get brought up enough. Basically, when you go back, everyone's on a top 3 seed. Everyone's on a 50-win team, unless they're having this generational defensive player of the year season in terms of the advanced metrics, which weren't always used until recent years, which favored Rudy Gobert and tends to favor centers. And ultimately, if you are a defensive player of the year candidate to win the award, you have to be on a good team. You have to be on a good defense. You have to be on a 50-win team, unless you're so transcendently good by the metrics that you're just undeniable, or people just love you. So we'll see what happens with this particular field, but that's sort of where this has been trending lately.
Defensive rating too. You have 23 of the last 25 winners were top 5 their team in defensive rating. So you hit seed, you hit wins, you hit defensive rating too. That's also important.
Yeah, so as kind of a follow-up to that, last 10 years, the average defensive rank for the DPOY winners team is 1.6. Like if you look back historically beyond that, like Camby messes it up because they were 12th, but most of these are, you need to be a top 3 defense. You really also need to be a top 2, and you should be top 1. I actually asked voters, I polled how many did I poll? I polled 10 voters last season and was like, what's like the first thing that you look at? What's the thing, where do you start your process? And they all said defensive rating. And I think that's probably a shift from where we were back in the Camby days and really 10 years ago is, I think then it was steals, blocks, rebounds most especially. I think that was the starting point. And I still think if we kind of split this out, there are awards in sports, and this goes across sports, that some of them matter. Like it's either it doesn't matter at all how good your team is, or you have to be a good team. And DPOY, as Brian kind of laid out there, fits in the category of like, yeah, no, you got to win games. You can't just be an elite defense. If you're an elite defense, and I think like Jalen Suggs is a good example of why this probably won't happen, right? Is like the Magic were an elite defense, but Jalen Suggs doesn't have the box score numbers, and they didn't win enough games. So if you are somebody who's like, hey, I think Orlando could win 54 games this season, that's optimistic. We talked about that on the division pod. But if you are of that mindset, like, look, then Jonathan Isaac or Jalen Suggs are great bets for you because they're going to fit those categories and be able to slide kind of into those things. And so we're looking for won a lot of games. Doesn't need to be an old guy. Historically has not been a super young guy. We'll talk about the exception to that consideration, which we've already mentioned here in a second. And then they need to obviously, like, the team's going to do really well defensively. From there, I will say that I do start looking at your box score metrics. And the one that I really kind of get to is, like, I've got in our notes here, is just blocks per game plus steals per game plus rebounds per game. I don't think this is a good way to evaluate defense. I think this is like a really shitty way to evaluate defense.
Agree.
However, guess who was second in this category last year? Rudy Gobert. Number 1 was Anthony Davis. If the Lakers had been a top 5 defense, Anthony Davis wins this award. That's why I bet Davis during the season. Like, if the Lakers are and we'll talk about this in a second with like how to bet in season, but if the Lakers are like are a top 5 defense by middle of December, yeah, I'm gonna be jamming AD DPOY again. He's gonna get hurt and miss 20 games. Third in blocks plus rebounds plus steals is Victor Wembanyama. Again, that's coming. We'll talk about that next. As a sign of how this is not a good way to evaluate the award, 4th is Domantas Sabonis, and 5th is Nikola Jokic.
He got a vote. Hey, he got a vote.
He did. That great point by Braxton. Domantas did. He did in fact get a vote. So I guess technically there's some value there. I will note that a sneaky one is Joel Embiid at 6. Go ahead, Brian.
There's another key thing here, and Joel Embiid actually in his career has finished runner-up at least one time. It might have been multiple times, but he's finished runner-up before.
Yeah.
Another key thing here is, and we'll probably get into this more, you kind of also have to be a center or at least a big. Because if you're looking at who's won the award as of, and this is, I hate this shit as somebody who appreciates perimeter defense and understands what Jalen Suggs did last year and what he may do again next year, may do it better this year. Like, that has to be all defense worthy, defensive player of the year consideration. Like, and he was all defense, but I'm talking about first team. Ultimately, like, if you're a guard, you're kind of fucked. Marcus Smart won Defensive Player of the Year a couple years ago in 2021-2022 season. And a lot of people felt, narrative-wise, that Robert Williams was trending to potentially win that award before Marcus Smart eventually got hurt or whatever the case may be. And it's like, all right, a Celtic deserves to get it because the advanced metrics, they were great, yada, yada, yada. He was the first guard to win that award since Gary Payton in 1995, 1996. So one guard has basically won Defensive Player of the Year in nearly 30 years. And then the other piece of this is 3 wing players, like actual wing players, unless we're counting Draymond Green as a wing, I do not. But 3 wing players or 3 Defensive Player of the Year winners have been wing players since 1988. Whew. 2 of them are Kawhi Leonard. And the other one is Ron Artest in 2002, 2003, when he was named Ron Artest.
But, like, I want Jalen Suggs to win. Fuck.
Me
okay,
too.
Yeah, I'm taking Jalen Suggs off the list. I'm taking Jalen Suggs off the list.
Listen, it could happen.
No, it can.
Because,
look, if we get to midseason and there's a narrative for it, then I will make that case. But those numbers are stark, and they're a good reason not to bet them in preseason. I just know that I have nothing but the utmost respect for Jalen Suggs. Like, as much as I think Bam, I think Bam is the best defensive player in the league, but I don't think he had the best defensive season last year. If I had a vote last year, I would have voted for Jalen Suggs. That would have been my vote last year. I do want to talk about, I always mention EPM on the show, and defensive EPM, I believe, is a pretty stable metric amongst others. You can have your own that you prefer. Brandon Anderson prefers BPM. Defensive BPM, I prefer EPM. You can Google if you want the differences in those. It's not worth talking about. I will say this, that if we go back through the percent, I looked at the percentile. What percentile did you finish the prior season before you won Defensive Player of the Year? And it goes like this. Kawhi Leonard was 98th and then 99th. Draymond was 99th. Rudy was 99th and 99th. Giannis was 95th. Rudy was 99th. Smart was 90th. Another, again, probably shouldn't have won that year. Jackson 97th, and then Rudy Gobert last season was 95th. So the last 10 winners, we have 95th percentile or better in this category. If you're wondering who fits those categories from this season, the list is Jonathan Isaac led all players with 100th percentile plus 4.1 in defensive EPM, but he also, plays 16 minutes per game, which is a problem. Hartenstein finished second in that category. Hard for him to get there for a number of reasons. Marcus Smart only played in 20 games, but he did somehow rack up the third best mark in this category. Joel Embiid was fourth, which is going to stick in my head quite a bit as we have this conversation. Caruso was fifth, but again, the problem is he plays less than 30 minutes. That's my issue with Caruso. Anunoby was sixth, but again, he gets hurt and only played 50 games. Victor fucking Wembanyama, as a giraffe that doesn't know how to walk, somehow finished seventh in this category because he's insane. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Dennis Smith Jr., Draymond, Jalen Suggs, and Bam Adebayo ran out that list for the top 97 percentile or better on this category. So I'm not saying that you have to adhere to this, but if you're looking for names, and if there's a guy that you like on this list and he's not in the 95th percentile or better in defensive EPM, historically they haven't won. That just hasn't been the case recently. I always say this about EPM, that it's not that EPM that people look at EPM and then vote. It's that whatever it is that the voters are looking for, EPM, both on a broad scale and a defensive EPM, aligns more closely with what the voters reward. So it's the opposite correlational. It's not, he has a high EPM, so they're going to vote for him. It's, he has a high EPM, so there's a very good chance that the voters are going to appreciate how he plays. I would like to now turn and talk about Victor Wembanyama. Victor's the favorite in this award, which is categorically insane. Not from he should not be the favorite, just from this kid that was on the 21st ranked defense last year, who half of the time doesn't know what he's doing, is the favorite to win DPOY. And you can't even be wow, they're just crazy projecting him because he finished second in the voting last year. Victor got 19 first place votes last season, 245 votes. The gap between him and third place Bam is 150 votes. But Braxton, this will be the youngest DPOY ever. The Spurs were 21st in defense last season, but they were 12th after All-Star. They add Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes, which Barnes was a terrible defender last year, and Chris is a million years old, but it is more veteran, so that helps. They're going to try and win games this year, so that helps. He was 98th percentile defensive EPM, and like I said, he's got crazy steals, blocks, rebounds. Braxton, you mentioned it, that you think Wemby should be the favorite. Is there any reason I haven't listed for why you think he should be the favorite? And then I have a follow-up for you.
Well, you forgot a guy, Castle, from the draft too.
Yep.
He is a very good defensive player, and you can kind of put him as a chess piece on whatever you need. Need him on a guard, need him on a wing. That's kind of where Castle is going to go for them. And, like you said, Barnes and Paul, they're not individually good defenders, but they can kind of teach this team how to play the right way and really boost their defense from that perspective. So I think if Victor ends up, or I guess the Spurs end up top 15 defensive rating, it's going to be hard to beat him. I think that if he finishes outside that, then there's a chance that maybe a Gobert or a Bam can somehow beat him.
Brian, where are you at with the Wembanyama DPOY hype?
I think it's out of control, but it's also he can win the award.
So it's like this is silly. Do you want to bet against him? Not really. No, not what I want.
I think it's silly that he's not even plus money. Some places on the market right now. He's minus 165 or whatever it is, which is crazy. But also, if you're a voter, some of whom are not going to look at this as deeply as others, is how I'll phrase it. You may just look at, hey, he averaged over 4 blocks and a steal and a half per 36 minutes last year. So if he plays about 36 minutes a game, which he might not, but he can get pretty close to that, right? If he has an absurd season, because if you're just looking at his his averages, and he logged about 30 minutes per game last year. He still led the league in blocks with 3.6. He had almost 5 stocks a game. If he gets north of 5 stocks a game this year, I think people might just look at that and be like, hey, because that's not, again, this is not how I measure defense, but this is how I think the common voter may measure it. Like, he has such a dominant lead because no one's going to challenge him in blocks per game this year if he does what he did last year in terms of blocks championship. Maybe Jaren Jackson Jr. gets close, but like, honestly, like, that's something he's going to run away with, which would be point in his favor. And I think the issue that I have is he's not going to be on an elite defense. I don't think the Spurs are going to have the defense required that historically you need if you're going to win Defensive Player of the Year. If you're a person that's going to win Defensive Player of the Year, you just need to be on a team that we just outlined it. You typically need to be top 3, or in the case of Rudy Gobert several years ago, top 5 in your conference. Nobody has been outside of the top 5 of their conference and won since another Spur, Kawhi Leonard, in 2014-15. But I could also look at Victor Wembanyama and be like, he might be that transcendent to where people will just give him the award anyway. And also on top of this, because all awards are narrative driven, he's going to have the highlight moments. He's going to have the hype. He's going to have buzz. There are going to be plays every single night that he is out there where we're just looking at, holy shit, he did this. Holy shit, he did that. You know, where he got the steal from, I forget, it was behind RJ Barrett in the Olympics, where like he just reached behind him with one arm and pulled it away with the other and then just went the other way. Like, he's going to do shit like that every game. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just going to be in the voters' heads to where, look, he may just be undeniable, where if I give you, Matt, somebody who's going to buck the trend historically, and I design in a lab who that's going to be, it would look like Victor Wembanyama, who is supposed to be somebody we've never seen before.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think is I started following like the historical trends of just like, hey, like this is just who has won before, and this who was like never won the award. And Ken Barkley on You Better You Bet, before he went to be a pro gambler, talked about this, about like, that doesn't mean that this person can't win, just that it's never happened before. And usually it's pretty good to bet against things that have never happened. And the question is like, what would make somebody vote against those trends? What breaks those kind of trends? Because I don't think the voters are like, ooh, nobody's ever done this, so I can't do it. I don't think that's the way it is. I think they just happen to follow those patterns. And it's like, what would cause them to do so? And the answer is like being a human pterodactyl. Like that changes the equation. Like literally being, you mentioned this, and I wrote about this before. Every beat writer, whenever they watch Victor Wembanyama, like they say that like, I've just never seen anything like this before. And that's really kind of what makes him so transformational. And yeah, like just, okay, the top 10 defense, leads the league in blocks with an outrageous block percentage, or block rate. That's probably enough to get him there. Braxton, you kind of mentioned that, you know, you don't think that now is the time to bet him. So my dispute with that is, what's the scenario where Victor's price gets better and he can actually win? What does that look like in season?
Well, I think it would be strong defensive openings from teams like the Lakers, Anthony Davis, or, you know, maybe Bam, and the backcourt kind of shapes up. Also, I think games missed might push that down a little bit. If Wemby has an early injury, the 65 game minimum is in. That's real. That's a big thing that a lot of players have to contend with, namely Davis, who has hit that once in his last 6 seasons. So I think that injury and strong defensive team showing from certain players might drive it to almost even money, minus 120, minus 130. I think that's your best case you're looking at. But it could be minus 250 3 weeks into the season. It's kind of unknown.
Yeah. I will say, if you want to bet this in season, you don't want to take a long, like I would bet long shots now. And then I would just basically wait until December 1st. And on December 1st, whoever is like, look at the top 3 defensive teams and then start identifying guys. And that to me, I think is a pretty good way to kind of go about it, because we know it's going to be from one of those teams, and defense is pretty stable month to month. It doesn't vacillate as much as some of these other metrics will. Defense does tend to like the Wolves jumped out to be number 1 and they just kind of stayed there. And the Celtics were high, and they just kind of stayed there. And really, the Heat were one of the few teams I think that really climbed as the season went on. Brian, let's talk real quickly. What are your reasons for why you want to lose money on Bam for the 18th season in a row? And then I'll give mine.
I mean, again, he's the only player in the NBA who's been top 5 in Defensive Player of the Year voting for the last 5 seasons. I think he should have at least one Defensive Player of the Year from these last 5 seasons. And he's been all defense all 5 of those seasons. He made a first team last year, and he was on the second team all the other years. Of course, last year was positionless, so that helped him get to the first team. He probably would have multiple first team all defense awards if these were positionless prior to last season. So I just think that with Bam, like, I'll give you the case for why I want to bet him and why I think he can and probably should have already win and won this award. But I'm also going to, on the back end, be like, here's why he's not going to win it. And here's why he's ultimately not going to, like, here's why he's going to break our hearts again. Not him, but the voters. Maybe that organization. But with Bam, like, he just, you watch him, I agree, Matt, just the best defensive player in the NBA, I think. He's the most versatile. He is somebody who, and this to me is the essence of it. You could throw him on basically anybody in the NBA, and he can get a stop. And for most guys, he will. Maybe Nikola Jokic notwithstanding, but he's even had a little bit of success relative to most others against Nikola Jokic. Jokic is one of the only guys that bothers him historically, but Nikola Jokic is also, speaking of unprecedented players, it's already a top whatever center we've seen in NBA history and may continue to rise up the ranks as he progresses for however long his career lasts. But Bam could guard basically anybody. He is a walking top 10 defense, essentially. Like, the Heat have been very good defensively the last few years, in large part because of him. Jimmy Butler is on that team too, but Jimmy Butler last year was kind of the first year where you saw, like, he's not really that same Jimmy Butler all defense type of dude that we've typically seen. Maybe last year was an anomaly and he returns to that this year, but he's getting older and maybe he's not at that point of his career anymore, which is going to be a point that detracts from Bam, because ultimately, if you're looking at team defense, other guys have to be great defensively. But with Bam and Eric Spoelstra, you know the Heat are going to be top of the line defensively in terms of, like, they'll be in the top half of the league. They'll probably be in the top 10 again. They're going to get in consideration. The reason why I don't think he'll ultimately get it, but I'm still going to bet it anyway, is because the team might not have enough success when we're talking about top 3, top 5 in the Eastern Conference. Like, there's a world where that happens, but I wouldn't favor it. You might have a better chance of seeing them miss the playoffs than that. I don't think that's going to happen either, but we're probably talking about them being in a play-in again, or at least on the fringes of that 6 seed, 7 seed, 8 seed, whatever the case may be. But Bam, in all likelihood, if I were setting a market for him to be all defense, he'd be like minus 1,500, minus 2,000. Like, he's going to be all defense if he's healthy. He's done it for 5 straight years. And that automatically makes him a DPOY candidate. And again, only player in the NBA top 5 for the last 5 years. I'm going to keep saying it because he's the only person. It's not, Rudy Gobert wasn't one of those years. Draymond Green hasn't done that, like, et cetera. You keep going down the line. So he also has enough body of work to where I'm like, okay, maybe he can get over the hump. But ultimately, I think there's too much going in his favor, to really say, like, he'll definitively win this unless the Heat sort of punch above their weight, which, when have they ever done that before? I don't know. A few times in the last 5 years. So, like, it's possible, and it's a big number. It's like plus 1,700 out there, plus 1,500 out there. So that's part of it too. It's like you're just getting insane value on it. And as soon as the season starts, that number is going to drop.
So you think that the Heat can be a top 3 seed?
No, I'm saying, like, there's a world where that happens, but I do not think top 3. I think top 5 could happen. Yeah. I think top 5 is possible. I don't think
you have the number there, right? 7 of 9.
But I do think, Matt, here's the thing. I do think there are teams, and this is a big picture conversation perhaps, there are teams in the East who I think will take a step back, which could open a door for a team like the Heat, the Magic, who we talked about earlier, who I think should get some consideration here. So that's sort of the thing to look at too.
But, like, 9 of the last 10 DPOY winners on 50-win teams.
Mm-hmm.
Like that makes
But
me
you're
want
not. But also, are you not going to bet the only guy who's been top 5 in DPOY vote in the last 5 years?
No, because I think
Like you're automatically getting a contender.
so. But that's
like
that,
automatically.
I think that actually I think works against him because it's like, I mean, last year I think is a great example of this. They finished top 5. That team has no talent. Bam is absolutely everything. His numbers were actually up in some of these key categories, and he couldn't get past the 19-year-old.
I think the Olympics
Maybe.
will also help.
Yeah, the Olympics.
I think because more people saw, more casuals, I should say, saw what he was able to do defensively or whatever. But it like, if you want like, what's a bet that you would actually put like a good amount of money on? I would say he'll finish top 5 again. Okay. Defensive Player of the Year voting. He'll do that again.
I want to talk Rudy Gobert, but I also want to make sure that we give Braxton time for his plays and give him a decent amount of runway. Braxton, we'll come back to Draymond. Give me the case for Chet at 16-1.
Well, I think 50-win team for OKC is pretty much an automatic.
Yep.
They swapped Josh Giddey, who the defense is going to be a lot better with Caruso, Hartenstein. They're going to be a 60-win team, more likely than a 50-win team. They're going to be a top 3 defense, fighting for first. And Chet's going to have blocks and steals. The eye test is there. For me, my problem with Chet, my one thing, are voters going to be able to distinguish, or I guess attach, defensive success to Chet? Because OKC minus Chet is still a top 5 defense, in my opinion. So is he crucial enough where they say Chet is the reason OKC is this good? Caruso's there, Dort's there, Wallace. That's where I'm a little bit hesitant. But I think overall 16-1, that's a good price for a guy that kind of checks all boxes to me.
Yeah, I mean, he would also break the mold of the age thing. He'd be the youngest DPOY winner. But also, like, he was incredible last year too. I do wonder though. I think it's gonna be very hard. It's kind of like the Boston problem, right? Where it's like Derek White probably should have finished higher, but it's like, I don't know, man. He's got Drew Holiday and he's got Kristaps Porzingis and Tatum's a plus defender and Jaylen Brown was really good. Like they have a million, like their good defenders are Alex Caruso, Lou Dort, Casey Wallace. Like Shea's good for his role capacity, on and on. Hartenstein was elite last year in terms of the defensive metrics. So yeah, I think it's hard to get there, but I do like the kind of play on it just because he is like, he also is transformational. That's how good he is. We'll talk about Draymond in a minute, but I want to talk about Rudy. So, all right, Rudy's got 4 of these damn things, and that's a lot. He's 32 years old. There have been 8 back-to-back winners, so it's including Rudy the first time. So it's not like there's no resistance to this award like there is with MVP or other awards. Like there's no like we actually tend to reward DPOY more. I think in part because Brian kind of mentioned it. The voters are not this award just from if you're trying to think through how the voters vote, voters can't do this vote well. They can't. If the league were to call me up and be like, hey, how do you think DPOY should be selected? I would say you need to remove it from the general awards pool and have a half player, like player, coach, media composite whose entire, like those guys need to be the ones that decide it. Those people need to be the ones that decide it, and only that award. Because in order for you to really understand how good somebody is on defense, you cannot do it with metrics and you cannot do it anecdotally. You can't even like if you search like youtube.com, like if you go to YouTube and you just like search like Victor Wembanyama defensive highlights, that's not going to tell you about who Victor is as a defender. You're never going to be able to capture it. Like you have to do the film. Like when I do it from a metric standpoint, I'm cross-referencing like 7 different metrics to try and get a composite of information on what their strengths and weaknesses are. And even then it's incomplete. You just have to do the film. And I say all this to say that like, it's very easy to just kind of write in Gobert. Like if Victor doesn't play 65 games and the Wolves are once again the number 1 defense and Rudy plays 65 games, it's going to be very easy to just give Rudy another award because he is that impactful. However, Brian, this is like the lowest people have been on Rudy. he got clowned in the Western Conference Finals and in the Olympics, and Shaq says he's the worst NBA player ever. Check out that podcast on Playmaker. Like they're in a roller coaster of Rudy Gobert discourse. We are at the nadir for how people kind of regard him, and so I kind of wonder if that's going to wind up hurting him. Braxton, I'll go to you first, actually, because you're nodding your head. Like, I feel like there's more sentiment against Rudy than ever going into this season.
Yeah, if you shorted Rudy Gobert stock a few months ago, you're probably a millionaire, because
Yeah.
I don't think anyone can be lower on him right now. For me, I'm not betting him because he doesn't really have any path for progress. He's not answering any questions to me. He's kind of the same old Rudy Gobert. You know, last year he answered, could Minnesota be elite with Towns and Gobert on the court? And they could. He proved it. This year, I'm just concerned that it's pretty stagnant. He doesn't have much runway for growth. And then you have Victor, Chet, all these guys up and coming. It's going to be difficult when you have a trajectory that's pretty, stale. I'm not buying Gobert for Defensive Player of the Year this year, although I do think he wins or makes all defensive first team.
Yeah, I think that seems likely. Brian, what do you think about Gobert?
I don't think he should have 4 Defensive Player of the Year awards. I think that's pretty outrageous. And I think I'm not sure this is actually the lowest the public has been on him, because they were pretty low after that first season in Minnesota, and he didn't get any Defensive Player of the Year love, any all defense, placement. And yeah, now we're back to, I guess, that point, if you want to call it that. Look, beyond the fact that he got clowned in the Western Conference Finals and just gets clowned in general, and Shaq talking shit about him, he was also bad in the Olympics. And I think that's going to stick with people for at least the first part of the season, from the standpoint of, like, France benches him and they get better. And they go on this run to the gold medal game, which Joe Delera and I were saying, I mean, maybe it's possible, but leading up to the Olympics, they hadn't had a clean offense in 2 years. Because in the World Cup last year, they were bad. Rudy Gobert was part of that. And in Eurobasket the year before was the last time they had been good. So they were trying to search for answers, and France benches him and basically builds the team around Victor Wembanyama and unleashes Matthias Lesort and Gershon Yabusele, who's now with the Philadelphia 76ers. And all of a sudden, this team is punching above their weight, so to speak. They beat Germany, which was kind of unexpected. They were underdogs in that game despite being at home, because Germany were the world champions last year and won the World Cup last year and looked a lot better than France did. And Rudy Gobert basically did not have an impactful Olympics, specifically at the end. And I think that's going to resonate with some people, even though it's international basketball, because it felt like this year was the most people watched international basketball this past summer than, the Olympics, has been consumed maybe since 2008 or something along those lines. Just the basketball piece of it, just the men's basketball piece. I don't know, that's factual or whatever, but it felt, the energy was like this was a more magnified Olympics than we've seen in years. Definitely was than 2021.
Yeah.
And I think also, if you look at it from an purely NBA perspective, Rudy Gobert is entering year 12. He is in his early 30s. And now, I don't think you're going to come away from the summer and being like, oh, okay, Rudy Gobert is still going to have a better defensive year individually than Victor Wembanyama is. I think a lot of the voters are going to want to give the award to Victor Wembanyama.
Yeah.
Because they're going to be motivated to do so because what they see on a night-to-night basis. I think Rudy Gobert, having won this award 4 times, and there are a bunch of people who don't think he deserves 4 Defensive Player of the Year awards anyway, are going to have Rudy Gobert fatigue. And I think that's going to work against him too.
Yeah, I'd agree. I would agree on the fatigue point. I will say that right now, I believe, I've said this for a long time, we are incapable of accurately rating Rudy Gobert. We can't do it. We have no capacity to do it. It's either he's trash, and it's like people saying like he got played off of the court in the playoffs. I'm like, that's not accurate. Actually, he held up really well, did pretty well. And like, you're absolutely right that he struggled in the Olympics, but also like with a ton of respect for the awesome work that you've been in. I don't give a shit about what he did in international basketball. It's another sport entirely. How he is in the NBA doesn't matter to me. Which is not to say that he hasn't been overrated, because I think when people were like, there was a period of time from like 17 to 21 when people were like, he's one of the most impactful players offensively in NBA basketball. And I'm like, nope, can't that is not a thing, sir. No, pass on. Draymond Green's going to be 35 next March, Braxton. But when you look over like the whole course of all of these candidates, repeat winners often win. Draymond's a repeat winner. Guys that wind up with the numbers, he winds up with a lot of the numbers. Oh, and I looked this up. After the All-Star break, the Golden State Warriors were 7th in defensive rating. Just a few notches outside of that thing. Give me why you think Draymond Green at an extremely high 150-1 is a bet worth making.
Yeah, I mean, the advanced numbers liked him a lot. He hit that DEPM metric, that 95th percentile. He hit that. And if you're looking at a guy who anchors a defense and has more defensive responsibility than maybe except Bam, I think Bam probably has the most, but Draymond's probably second for defensive responsibility. That's huge for voters. He has that sort of resume, which is crucial for defensive awards. You know, guys, if you have a profile, guys typically follow it and believe it. It's like all the Kobe Bryant, all defensive first teams that some of them were not great, but he had a reputation and he got him. So I think that's going to benefit Draymond here. And they added Melton, they added Kyle Anderson, another leap from Kuminga, Pods. I think that the team around him defensively is going to be better than last year. So if Draymond can drag him to top 5 defense, which I think there's a world where that happens with this team, then you're going to get at least a good cash out on this play. You might not get the winner, but I think a cash out at a minimum is going to be a profit here.
Yeah, I might be in on this, especially since I've now taken off 2 of my bets based off of the information that Brian's brought to this podcast. I like the Draymond play. I will also mention Jaren Jackson. So we talked about in the Southwest Division preview with Brandon. I talked about how I was like, I don't know what to make of this team. Like, I don't know what to expect from this team. A really high end result is the Memphis Grizzlies wind up winning like 55 to 57 games, being in play for the 1 seed. Maybe they're competing with the Oklahoma City Thunder and have a top 2 defense. And Jaren's block numbers are ridiculous. And because he's playing next to Edey, he has fewer fouls, so he gets to play more. He doesn't have to play center, but his value's still there because he's the backside rim protector. Like, there's a lot of things here that set up Jaren at 25-1. So that's going to be my best play on this. I do want to bring this up because Brax, I think he put in the rundown the note on the minutes about how often players wind up playing. They played 27 plus for every winner and 30 plus for the vast majority is what you put in there. So no role players like Jonathan Isaac. But I want to ask you that. It's great. It's a great note that you put in the rundown. 27 minutes for every winner and 30 plus for the vast majority. I have a question for Brian off of that, but I want to hit you on this one. If we come into training camp for the Orlando Magic and on day 3, the starters get announced in terms of like, here's who's ran with the ones, here's who ran with the starters, and Jonathan Isaac has been the starting center consistently throughout camp, does that change the value on Jonathan Isaac for you?
No, because he played like 50 games last year and he still has to hit 15 plus more to hit the 65. So I'm not confident that he hits the game's limit for that. And I just don't see him playing 30 minutes. Orlando's too deep. I think that they'll want to save him for the playoffs and not overtax his body. So I'm just not a believer. I think per minute, he could win Defensive Player of the Year from that perspective. But in volume and the total body of work, he's not going to have enough to me.
Okay, it'll be interesting. I think he's one to watch if we get to, if he hasn't missed time, which again would be an exception to his career, but if he hasn't missed time by the time we get to December or January, we'll be talking a lot about him on buckets. By the same token of the 27 minutes and 30 plus for every, for most winners, Brian, on your list, you've got Alex Caruso. and I'll get Braxton's thoughts because he's a Thunder dude. This has been my problem is like I bet Caruso before, but Caruso never winds up playing enough minutes. He plays so hard in the minutes that he does play, but like even last year, he goes 71 games, but he only plays 28.7. Now, some of that might just be like the Bulls decided to, start like they're playing Levine and Kobe White and DeRozan, and this setup's a little bit different. However, the Thunder also have like such an embarrassment of riches that they don't have to start anybody that's not Shea, Chet, or J-Dub. Like they can, like Hartenstein's already said, like, yeah, if I come off the bench, it's fine. Caruso's not going to be pissed off if he comes off the bench. It's fine. And Casey Wallace is such like a high level replacement. If Caruso's banged up and it's like, yeah, no, my ankle's a little sore, take the night off. No worries. We have Casey Wallace to fill in for you alongside Lou Dort. So that's my concern with Alex Caruso. Do you have anything to like assuage my fears with regards to how much Caruso is going to play, Brian?
Well, it's 65-1. So I think that's
fair. Fair.
And in looking at just the elite defense theory, if we want to call it that, who are going to be the top 3 seeds in the Western Conference? I think everyone has the Thunder as being one of those teams. Many people think that they're going to be first in the entire NBA, not just the Western Conference, but perhaps just the Western Conference. Regardless, that's another thing that Alex Caruso, I think, will benefit from. Now, I think Chet Holmgren could get a lot of that credit, but the 65-game thing, I think it's going to matter to, everybody. But also, it's something you have to keep an eye on with Chet Holmgren, who's already missed a season, with someone like a Victor Wembanyama, who I think he got to 71 last year. He was being mismanaged. And, coming in, like, yes, he's a freak and all these different things. But coming into the NBA, we're all looking at him like, is that going to be able to hold up just in terms of health? So I think you need to be looking at long shots in the event that Victor Wembanyama misses, a few weeks. And then you're talking about, hey, is he even going to make the 65-game threshold? Alex Caruso is one of these guys because I do think that with Marcus Smart winning a few years ago, I think Alex Caruso could have a better season than Marcus Smart did. And he can do that on a regular season team that Celtics team was really good in the regular season, but they were second in the East. I think this Oklahoma City Thunder team could win the most games in the NBA during the regular season. And I think that if Chet Holmgren does sort of toy around with that 65-game minimum, let's say he misses a few weeks and Isaiah Hartenstein is starting and they're fine, like they're okay, like maybe there's not like a super significant drop off. I think Alex Caruso is going to get a lot of credit for that. He's going to play national TV games. There's going to be games where he's guarding like the other team's best perimeter scorer, and we're going to see numbers where like, hey, this person was 2 of 11 when Alex Caruso was guarding them. We're going to see a bunch of that, I feel like, throughout the course of this year. So in terms of the guards, I think he and Jalen Suggs are probably where I'd look. Maybe Drew Holiday, Derek White, but like they kind of like hurt each other's case, so to speak. I think that Alex Caruso, if he does play like 29, 30 minutes a game, we'll see. But part of it is just, hey, Oklahoma City is going to be that good and somebody's going to get the credit for their defense, and it's going to be him, Chet Holmgren, maybe Lou Dort also, but I think it's more likely to be him or Chet Holmgren.
I'm going to bet Bam Adebayo and Jalen Suggs and Herb Jones just for a God damn it, they should win. Yeah. They should be on the ballot and then just light money on fire. That's just all I'm doing is lighting money on fire. These guys that will not win. Okay. That's going to do it for Defensive Player of the Year. You can find out more about this. We'll have these guys on again to give their best bets throughout the NBA preseason. Check out Braxton Reynolds on Twitter and the Action Network app. Brian Fonseca across all platforms, doing lots of stuff on fighting and in the NBA. Catch him, Brian Fonseca NY. We'll be back tomorrow as we're debuting a new feature on Defensive Player of the Year. I'm going to have Joe Dolera on. We're going to do Price Finder. I'm going to give Joe 2 choices on bets, and he gets to choose between the value of the 2 bets, and we're going to go through that. We're going to do that for all the awards. Should be a fun one. Make sure to download the Action Network app. Check out youtube.com/the Action Network. My thanks to David Payne, our producer, as well as Tito and the video crew getting us up over at youtube.com/the Action Network. Hope you guys had a great NFL weekend. We'll see you guys again next time. Till then, let's get buckets.